Hello and welcome to another episode of the AAIM High Podcast. Today's guest is Eugene Lee, Director at PS Business Management. After graduating from Georgetown University's business school in 2001, Mr. Lee took a unique path starting a retail company in Baltimore that grew to 6 locations and nearly 50 employees. After he sold the company in 2008, he pivoted to the music industry in Los Angeles, eventually joining PSBM in 2010. At PSBM, Mr. Lee manages a diverse client base, including performing musicians and music producers. Based in the Los Angeles office, Mr. Lee is a driving force behind PSBM's success. Please welcome Eugene Lee.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so to start off, because this podcast is centered around being an Asian American leader in business, it is first important to understand each guest's childhood and upbringing as an Asian American. Especially ideas instilled within you from your parents and your environment can help lead to your success and where you are today. So could you maybe just explain your childhood situation growing up? Where did you grow up, siblings, family dynamics, etc.?
This is kind of for many of us, especially us Asian Americans, it seems that we all have a very similar story. At least the people we become friends with or become really close with growing up, and then even later in life, it's like kind of because we share similar stories, especially in our upbringings. And so for me, I would say it was pretty stereotypical, but at the same time, a little bit different in the sense that, my parents chose to send my sister and myself to a private school, or like, one of the, two of the probably like the top private schools in Baltimore. I don't want to say top as though it's like some sort of in a conceited way. I'm just saying because academically they were really considered at the top in terms of the number of kids who would graduate to go on to Ivy League schools and or top institutions. And they really stressed academics a lot. Whereas, there was, I have friends who obviously went to private schools as well who didn't stress academics and they're much more progressive. But so with that being said, yeah, I went to private school, Gilman, from 4th grade to 12th grade. It was an all-boys school that stressed academics, sports as well. Lacrosse, football. I played on the golf team. We went to the state championship 3 years in a row when I was on the varsity team. And perennially, like in lacrosse, we graduate, kids who get full scholarships to like the top lacrosse schools in the Northeast. So yeah, it was definitely perennially one of those schools, right? It's like, but my sister also went to a very similar school right across the street, all boys, all girls. So no co-ed. I graduated a class of 93 kids. I think in elementary school when I started in 4th grade, there was maybe 50 kids, 40 kids. So yeah, I mean, my parents really chose to, in their minds, they thought that and again, this is the stereotypical part, is that they thought that if we went to a good school, we went to a good college, we would get a good job, we would make good money, and we would be happy, right? So I'll get into that later. But I think, for parents who came here with, pretty much, no money in their pockets, started their own business, very atypical from other Korean parents who maybe like were doctors or, were working at an established company before they came to the U.S. and their family was relocated there. They had an option to relocate to the United States. My parents came, like most immigrant families, not just Asian Americans, with, a dream to have a better place for their kids. It was never about them. And that's the difference is that, I think that my parents, it's not that like my parents made a lot of money, but they decided to spend all the money they did make on our education as opposed to themselves, right? Whereas, I had friends who, his parents chose to send their kids to public school, but allowed them to, buy luxury goods, buy nice cars, things of that nature. My parents just chose not to do that. Now, with that being said, it's not that we grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment with 4 of us. I mean, like my parents did well enough where like, they were able to, buy a home when I was 4 or 5 years old. And we were able to move out of the city into the suburbs. We were 4 or 5 and we lived in the suburbs still then. But again, it's something that was instilled in me at a very young age, is that, it's like and something I remember, and as you realize as you get older, is that they really came here for us, right? It was never for them, it was for us. And to sacrifice everything in their capacity to give us a better life. It's just kind of seeing how my parents came from two completely different backgrounds, but were able to kind of uh, unify into one goal, which was to come to America and learn about this land of dreams, right? Like this place where
Mm.
you come and you're able to give this kid, your kids, this opportunity to become whatever they want to be, right? So,
Hmm.
so that's kind of my story. And so my parents, just to give you a little bit of my history, my parents, they came here with very little money. They had one friend who lived here. They started a kind of a bodega on a corner store in East Baltimore, living in a one-bedroom apartment with yeah, I mean, did that live and then lived on top of the bodega for the first like 2 years, I think, because they had nowhere else to live. And then they were able to move outside of the city and have a separate place to live. But again, that place
Hmm.
that they were living in that one bedroom apartment was not, it wasn't like the nicest neighborhood, but it's better than living in the city of East Baltimore, where if you know your history in the 80s and 90s, was not a good place to live. I mean, East Baltimore and DC were probably hit by the crack epidemic more so than any other
Hmm.
inner city in or so, like one of like the top 10 in the country, right? They were hit very hard during that crack epidemic. And so not a good place to live. But yeah, they did that for a couple years, saved up some money, and then they opened their first clothing store, their men's clothing store, which funny enough was called Eugene's Menswear. My dad opened his first clothing store in 1984, and
Hmm.
then ended up opening a chain of stores in Baltimore City and then did that for about, I want to say 25, 30 years, and then before
Wow.
retiring. But yeah, I mean, he had the same business for a long, long time. And
Hmm.
my mom was, she went to college, was a registered nurse, worked at a hospital in Germany. And so, she chose not to do that in the States. First of all, they couldn't speak any English, right? But secondly is that,
Hmm.
they chose the route of going an entrepreneurship. And so that's also something that was instilled in me at a very young age. Sometimes as a kid, I'd be like, oh man, like, all these other kids' parents are like stockbrokers and doctors and lawyers. And like my parents have stores, chain of clothing stores, in East Baltimore. It's like you kind of look, you kind of think, oh man, like what, this doesn't seem like the life. But as I grew older, I realized, oh wow, like this is pretty cool. Like you are your own boss, you run your own business, but it also taught me so much in terms of my dad probably like since I probably saw my dad miss maybe like a total of 7 days of work for the entire 25 years that he was running his business. And so
Jeez.
like that's I mean outside of like vacations we took here and there, right? But
Hmm.
usually we take like one or two vacations, but it was like short, like 4 or 5 day vacations, right? But my
Hmm.
dad never missed work, right? And
Hmm.
it was really just because he taught, I realized later it's that, people always say when you run, own your business, it must be great. You're your own boss and things of that nature. Well, what people
Hmm.
don't realize is that the luxury of owning your own business, like the things that you think of running your own business versus having another job, is that when you work for another company, if you miss 7 days of work, someone else will figure it out. You've got tons of other people who can pick up the slack. People get
Hmm.
fired left and right. People quit left and right. When you run your own business, especially a small business, like my parents said, even though they had 4 locations, it's that if they didn't handle the work, then it wouldn't get done, right? It's not one of the things where my dad could just be like, "Oh yeah, I'll have someone else handle it." No, like he had to do most of the buying, the buying and a lot and run a lot of the roles that most other companies would have several people running. So that
Hmm.
also taught me so much in the sense that entrepreneurship is something so different than working at a company.
Did your parents' experiences running retail stores when you were younger influence your decision out of college to do the same thing?
It's actually, I wouldn't say that it influenced me as much as it was kind of, things just happened organically. Like when I was at Georgetown, the business school offered an actual major. One of the majors that they offered was called New and Small Business Management, and basically just to have this entrepreneurship, which I look back on and say that was probably one of the best experiences, because it's like, they were kind of ahead of their time, right? Like most of the other majors were finance, accounting, all the normal standard majors that you would see in a business school. But the New and Small Business Management entrepreneurship program was a great way for me to also realize that, hey, look, like there instead of just going the normal route of accounting, finance, consulting, all of these other business related ventures, it's like there's also these, like, they were breeding, and promoting people to say, hey, look, think outside the box. It's okay to think outside the box. So I already kind of had that mindset coming out of college, but the problem, the thing was, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but the thing was, when I came out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I really didn't know. Like, most of my friends all went up to Wall Street. I knew I wasn't going to do finance because that's not what I majored in. I was applying to kind of various positions. One of the positions I really wanted to get, I made to the final rounds, but didn't actually end up getting a position, was a very well-known real estate asset management firm based in DC. Now, because I didn't get the position, I didn't end up finding the job that I wanted / wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was at that time that my ex business partner, who's still my best friend, he was like, he was graduating from University of Virginia, the School of Engineering, which you graduate from the School of Engineering, UVA, you're not going into clothing, right? You're going into a lot of other facets besides that. But he decided to, and this happened in 2001. So mind you, this is like 9/11, right? This was like the year of 9/11. There was like all this turmoil, like people didn't know what they were going to do. And so we were just like, man, it's like, maybe we should just do this thing, learn something, and see where it goes, right? So that's what we did. We ended up, so I ended up, he opened the first store, then I ended up joining, and then we ended up opening, 5 more locations together. And we did that for almost 6 years, right? That experience was also a great foundation into what I'm doing today. And so again, this happened organically. I want it to be very clear that it's okay for you to not know what you want to do out of college. It's so funny because we're taught to believe that if we don't know what we want to do by the time we're seniors in high school or sophomores in college, when you're supposed to choose your majors going into junior year, that somehow you're like a failure, right? That you're just like, how do you not know what you want to do at this point in life? But it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
And that's what I tell all everyone as well. It's like, everything will happen organically, and things will, and it's all about timing, right? If you're in the right place at the right time, things happen, right? So, was it an influence? Yeah, maybe so. But I also think that it was organically happened. And secondly is that because both of us because his parents owned like a chain of like 13 clothing stores, but they were women's. So his dad and my dad were our families were very close. We've known each other since we were a month old. We were born exactly a month apart. And our parents, like his parents, same story, couldn't find an apartment. They had this one little store. They tried to, they wanted to sleep on top, they were like, okay, we'll just sleep on top of our store, kind of our situation too, until we find an apartment. His dad drove around looking for a mattress, literally found a mattress on someone was storing away, cleaned it up, tried to take it up to the top of the store, but couldn't fit the mattress in. So there's no way to make it happen. So they ended up crashing into my parents' like 1-bedroom apartment when we were like little babies for like a couple months until they could find an apartment. So yeah, I mean, it's literally the epitome of the American dream, right? And then now they send all 3 of their boys to private school. It's like they did very well for themselves, respectively. And so, I mean, it's like, but we all started with nothing, right? We all started with nothing. And so yeah, he came from the same background. So we both had that experience. So it was very easy to transition into that.
Yeah. Did you ever feel any pressure to conform to certain expectations when you were growing up from your family or the broader community?
Yeah, yes, felt pressure, but it wasn't as much as, my parents didn't pressure me as much as, it was more pressure of doing well in school,
Mm-hmm.
excelling in everything that I do. But it was never a question of, um, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you have to, like you have to do such and such. It was, I think it also just pressure I put on myself, right? Just but because of your surroundings, I really think you when people say you're a product of your surroundings, it's very, very true, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you look at places socioeconomically that are vastly different from where you and I, grew up or where you're growing up right now, it's like a lot of times most kids are a product of their surroundings. But, I think that rings true with myself. It's like my parents were, you're constantly around kids and parents were like, oh, you got to do well in school. Like you were measured by how well you did in school. You were measured by how
Mm-hmm.
well you excelled in sports. You were measured by how well you played the violin or piano, like, whereas like, but in terms of like career path, it was more so, you know, it was more so, kind of putting pressure on myself. But again, you're affected by the people around you.
Mm-hmm. And then as
Yeah.
we also talk more about, as you already did, your college and early career, was there a moment in your college journey that you kind of had an idea of what you wanted to do, or were you always kind of wanting it to happen organically, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, I think in college it was I I had some thoughts of what I wanted to do. I in college it's like you get to your junior year, you're in your major, right? I mean, I double majored in marketing and small, entrepreneurship, and you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you have an idea of what you want to do. But again, it's I realize it's like more like half of the kids I feel like were had had knew what they wanted to do only because their parents like drove them that way, like they pressured them that way, right? Or like their
Mm-hmm.
brother or sister pressured them that way. And then there were the other 50% of kids who basically were doing things on their own volition, right? They were like, I love finance. I love marketing. I love
Mm-hmm.
like I love this and that's why I'm doing it, right? So it's, I was probably in that. And then you have that small percentage of kids who are just like, it's like me, who are like, man, I want to do this. I want to do that. And I think a lot of that was driven by the fact that because I knew that I wanted to go into entrepreneurship, I wanted to own my own business. That's because
Mm-hmm.
I looked at my parents and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to own my business, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in 2001, it's like it wasn't that easy, right? I mean, it wasn't, opening a small business is one thing, but like, that was before. I mean, that was kind of like the dot-com period, but like, I wasn't like tech savvy, right? Like I wasn't a tech guy by any means, right? So, it's like for me, it's like I just knew that I wanted to do something on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what partly drove me to be like, okay, it's okay that I didn't get a job or take a job. Let's figure out what I want to do after after college, right? Once I graduate. And so yeah, that's how I organically fell upon my the business. And because we knew that so well, we knew the clothing business inside out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, let's see how this goes. Let's see where this goes. And yeah, I mean, I loved it. I loved it. But again, uh I definitely took the road less traveled, and that simply was because of my parents' background, and what I saw them growing up do, so
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then how did you then, because you sold the company, right?
Well, no. We sold the company, but it's like we didn't make a whole ton of money because we had debts, right? Like, so,
Mm-hmm.
especially of a company when you're only open for like 5, 6 years or 6 years, like we were, and we opened and expanded. Obviously, part of that process is like, hey, you like, where are you going to go now, right? Like, are you like, because the only step is you open more stores, you create more revenue, right? That's the only way to
Mm-hmm.
generate more revenue. But it was at that time that, been doing it for 6 years. My ex-business partner and I looked at each other and he already had visions of going into, after doing this business, was like, I don't want to be in the retail side. I want to be in the wholesale side. Like, I want to be the guy making the stuff that are going to all these stores, not the guy selling it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
That's a completely different market, but it is one essential part of the supply chain, right? It's like someone has to be making the stuff that you're selling at the stores, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I want to do that. And that's when I also looked, I looked at him and said, hey, I also don't, this is 6 years of great experience, but I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't know if I want to be a fast fashion retail store owner, which again, there's nothing. The Forever 21s of the world, all started by a Korean couple.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest retail clothing chains started by Korean couples. It's something that's kind of like clothing is kind of in our blood, especially in the Northeast as well. Like some of the biggest wholesalers, all Asian American owned, right?
Mm-hmm.
These
Yeah.
and my dad was friends with them. He knew a lot of them, played golf with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of funny that's kind of in our blood. But I just knew we kind of we looked at each other and said, like, I know that this is not my destiny. I know that I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. And it's like at
Mm-hmm.
that point, he was like, okay, so maybe it's time to split off. Maybe it's time to part ways and move on. So that's when he were like, okay, let's sell it. Let's go and move on. So that's when I decided, okay, I always knew that I wanted to work on the business side of music. But they don't teach you that at Georgetown. They definitely don't teach you that at Georgetown. They don't tell you, oh, the business, go work in the music business. It's like, no. Now it's a different story. So that's when I took, whatever, all my assets, my savings, and I said, hey, let's go to LA. Let's move to LA, go intern somewhere. And so, because I knew I had to start up at the bottom. The music business does not
Mm-hmm.
care if you went to Georgetown or Harvard. They want to know where you've worked, who you know. So yeah, that's what happened. I packed up my bags, moved out to LA, got an internship at Red Light Management. Red Light Management is probably one of the marquee artist management firms out there. They're very big. They manage bands like Dave Matthews Band, Dave Matthews Band, huge, 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 huge artists. I mean, they're globally, and they also have a huge EDM division as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been around for a long, long time. And so I interned there, moved up to a second assistant position, and that's when I discovered what a business manager does, and which is the role that I'm in now. When I realized, oh wow, so instead of working on the artist management side, I can work on the business management side, which is the finance side. Essentially, like I am now, instead of, like I'm handling all the finances for the artists. And so when I was working there at Red Light and I saw what a business manager did, I said, whoa, this is so much more in line with my skill set, my background, my education. Like, why am I not doing this? I should be doing this, not
Mm-hmm.
artist management. So yeah, that's how. So when that happened, I asked my friend, who also got me my friend's band, who's also managed by Red Light Manager. I said, "Who's your business manager?" And
Mm-hmm.
that's when he introduced me to his business manager. His business manager said, "Hey." I interviewed with him and he said, hey, I really think that you should meet my friend who owns a business in New York called PSBM. I think it'd be a much better fit. And so that's how I got introduced to the CEO of my company. And that was literally in 2010. And in
Mm-hmm.
2010, they flew me out to New York. I interviewed. I had an offer within 3 days. I packed up my bags in LA and moved to New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
What sparked that interest in the music side? Did you like play an instrument growing up, or was that
I
just always something you wanted to do?
That's a great question. So I did play the violin piano like most, and I played at Peabody. Like I played for a very long time. I played piano I think
Mm-hmm.
for like 6 years. I played violin for like 5 years. Like most kids, I was like average, but I loved it. I mean, still now to this day, I love classical music. My parents have like they love the opera. My mom loves classical music. She actually named me after one of her favorite conductors when she
Mm-hmm.
first moved to the States. She loved the symphony orchestra, like hearing them. And one of them was named Eugene Normandy. And so the
Mm-hmm.
conductor, I think, for the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra was named Eugene Normandy, and she saw that name and said, "I really like that name." So yeah, so that's how I got named Eugene. So that is a story in and of itself. But secondly is I just loved music as a young kid, like, but not
Mm-hmm.
just music. Like I loved hip hop, like rap, like I'm talking about like Run DMC, like, Big Daddy Kane, stuff that you probably don't even know, but
Yeah.
your dad probably knows and your uncle knows. But like I was obsessed with that stuff. In fact, I remember like one of the few gifts that I remember getting as a kid was my older sister bought me a cassette tape for Run DMC's record Raising Hell, which I don't know, sold I don't know how many records, but it was like changed my life, right? I think I was like 8 years old. I had no business listening to that. I mean, it had explicit lyrics on it. But
Mm-hmm.
I would literally listen to it on my Walkman or my stereo like every day. So it was just, I loved listening to music, rapping, dancing. It's like music. But it was like, I was like rock, hip hop, classical music, like it was everything. And so like
Mm-hmm.
even my science projects were all based on music. I remember like my science project was like, would a plant grow more if like my fifth grade science project was like, would a plant grow more if like if it heard listen to music for like 6 hours a day? And like it was like everything was everything that I did was music based. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I've always had an affinity for music. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
never thought that I could make a career out of it, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, and again, like I'm not on the creative side, so it's very important to note that I'm not on the creative side. But again, it's one of those things where even if you're not on the creative side, there's such a big part of how a musician gets to where they are outside of just the creative side, right? It's also
Yeah.
the finance, accounting side, the legal side, right? You've got to have a great lawyer, a great business manager, a great agent, and a great manager. So it's not just on the creative side, but also on the back end, right? So we're not getting all the accolades and the credits, but you do get a lot of, it's there's a sense of accomplishment of when you help an artist, get through buying their first home or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get out of a divorce settlement or like, help them negotiate their touring deal. It's like there's so many things that happen that may not be in the creative side, but are central to the artist's career.
Yeah. And now as we move on to a part of the podcast about your current job and like what you do right now, just so everyone knows, could you quickly summarize what you do at PSB Management?
Yeah. So if we were to kind of uh, summarize it kind of in broad strokes, you would say that you know we are essentially the CFO. We essentially sit on a
Mm-hmm.
role as a CFO for every one of our clients' businesses. So um, if a client, whether they're an artist, they're a songwriter, producer, an athlete, any high net worth individual, and who has a lot of moving parts, money is intertwined with almost every transaction for them, right? Like how much are they
Mm-hmm.
getting paid? How much expenses are going out? Who do they need to pay? Like their employees, their staff, their managers, their agents, their lawyers, their crew, their band. So I think for us, our role, our job is to it really encompasses everything to do with the money or the finances, right? So we control the checkbook. So that means
Mm-hmm.
any money coming in, any money coming out goes through us,
Mm-hmm.
which means that everything from royalties, show income, sponsorships, appearance fees, all that flows through an account that we control, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, if if a client had control of their own accounts, they'd be buying things and doing things that would be, that would really prohibit our ability to do our job right properly. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, once the money comes in and the money goes out, our job is to make sure to keep clear, concise financials that, in the event of an audit, that we can sign off on. So we also help file the tax returns, prep and file all the tax returns. And actually, the more important aspect is not what do you do with all the money. So you made all this money. What do you do with the money? Do you go and increase your touring production, or do you now sit back and invest in other businesses, or do you then put the excess cash and put it with a wealth manager or put it away for retirement? Like we help navigate all those decisions because we again kind of are sit in a role as a CFO. So if you
Mm-hmm.
kind of were to think about what a CFO does at a company, it really does encompass everything to do with the business, right? Like anything
Yeah.
finance related. So that's kind of broad strokes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then what does like a typical work day or like work week look like for you now?
Yeah, so typical work day, work week. I mean, we're managing, I mean, my book alone, I mean, I manage around 32 clients. So it's
Wow.
not like I have one client. So you have 32 different clients who could any given moment ask you any given question, right? Everything from, do I need to pay my house, put my housekeeper on payroll, or I want to go on personal vacation, like, do what, like, how much money can I spend? It's like, and or like, I've got a tour coming up. Like, can you, we need to finalize these budgets. There's a lot of things that encompass, that could really, create your day to day. But I
Mm-hmm.
think really in any given day, we're really just reviewing all the financials on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, meaning reviewing all the activity, right? So everything to do with their personal cards, their business cards, their operating accounts. We have to review it because if we don't review it, no one's going to review it. If
Mm-hmm.
a client will never sit there, very rarely look at their activity and say, "Oh, when did I charge this $5,000 at this, at this jewelry store or things of that nature? Or when did I spend $10,000 on this vacation?" Like, we have to constantly review that activity. We control the checkbook. So if a gardener needs to get paid or if their manager needs to get paid, we have to process all those payments. We also handle all the receivables, meaning like if they're owed, $100,000 for an appearance fee, our job is to go and get that money, right? And then obviously in a week to week basis, we're reviewing other activity. Now we have to code that activity. So you have to bring that into an accounting software to reconcile all those financials, because then at each quarter we have to take those financials and give it to our in-house tax team for them to run a tax projection. So not only is it just the accounting side, we have to also run what's called tax projections, right? So tax projections, which is kind of really, as you know, there's two things you can count on in life, which is death and taxes, right? So that's kind of the everything that we do really ultimately leads to the tax return, right? Are we filing the
Mm-hmm.
tax returns properly? Because that's really the biggest, the ultimately like the most important task is to make sure those tax returns are getting filed properly. And are we maximizing everything there? So that tax planning aspect really becomes the most important aspect or most important task for us, because it's not a matter of just filing the tax returns. It's also encompassing like retirement planning, everything else to maximize your deductions. But also it's like by running great tax projections, we can invest for the future, right? We can plan for the future properly.
Mm-hmm. And then what is your favorite part of your job?
I guess the favorite part of my job is knowing that we are, having such an intimate relationship with the client. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's, there, it's like having that intimate relationship with the client, because finances are such a private thing, right? If you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
like most people don't know what's in your checking account. They'll never know what's in your checking account. But in this business, we're the only ones outside the clients who know what's in the checking accounts, right? How much money do they really have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that and also helping them with their lives, like, whether it's buying their first home, buying their first, car, or like helping them with their investment properties, helping them with their investments, like having that relationship, and then like knowing that you help them get there, that
Mm-hmm.
that sense of accomplishment and that feel, that's like the best reward possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about accolades. I don't care if, like, it's great being recognized by your peers or being recognized by your clients, but just that feeling of accomplishment of like helping your artist get through something or accomplish something is like the best. That's a reward that money can't buy, right? That money
Mm-hmm.
can't pay for. So it's just great. And a lot of those things will never get printed in the press. They'll never get,
Mm-hmm.
it'll never become public knowledge. But just knowing that you can talk to the artist, you kind of like look at your artist from across the room and just like kind of get that wink of being like, hey man, like, thanks for helping me do that. It's like, it's, after doing this for 14 years, is still the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then who are some of your most famous clients or some of the clients you work with?
I would say the bigger, our firm itself, we obviously have, a lot of big clients, like Billie Eilish, LeBron James, Lizzo, Phineas, kind of these kind of clients, which we all kind of work on and help out, in different ways. But me personally, I would say my biggest ones are, Andrew Watt, who is a super producer who's produced probably 7 or 8 of the #1 hits on Billboard in the last 2-3 years.
Wow.
He produced the 2 #1 singles for Jungkook from BTS. Lucky Day, who I think has gotten nominated for another 2 Grammys. So he's been nominated for 13 Grammys, I think, in the last 3 years. He's won for Best Progressive R&B Record last year. Nathan Scherer, who many of your classmates will probably not know about, but Nathan Scherer is, he's directed music videos for, some of the biggest artists out there, like, Kendrick Lamar, I think Beyonce, like a lot of big artists. And he's also won several Grammys for those as well. So it's a very eclectic mix of artists, right? It's like you have songwriters, you have music video directors, you have an R&B, a very traditional or progressive R&B artist. It's like that's what I love, because I don't want to just stick mainly to just performing artists. I don't want to stick just mainly to songwriters. I just want to it's like having that eclectic mix of clients also makes it very, 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 very rewarding, because you can now see how you can actually, put these people together too, right? Like it's kind of like you're not just working in one sector of the industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how have your experiences running your own businesses shaped your philosophy / like method on managing other people's businesses and money?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that running your own business has given me such a competitive advantage over others who haven't, right? So, I will say this, I remember in my first 4 years, 3-4 years, when I used to work in our New York office, there were people who sat next to me. One of them had been working at Goldman Sachs as an analyst, doing the whole investment banking route. The other one had been working at an insurance company, also as like an analyst. I can't remember, but I vividly remember the CEO of my company saying in my evaluation at year 4 is that, your peers tell me all the time when they hear you on the phone, like, how does Eugene know this stuff? Like, how does Eugene know about these workers' comp audits? How does he know about workers' comp insurance? How does he know about liability insurance? How does he know about these tax planning projections that you are reconciling the accounts? Like, all these things I knew because I had my own business, and I was such a step ahead of all these other people because they had always worked for someone else. They weren't involved in the insurance discussion. They weren't involved in the projection discussions. They were never involved, because they were just a number. They were just, a number in a much bigger company who whose decisions are being made by someone else, right? But now that as business managers, we sit in that role, my experience as having sat in that role for my retail company was the reason why it's such a leg up, is that all of that came as, and even today, the advice that I give is all really foundationally comes from owning my own business, because I was faced with those decisions myself, right? It's like, do I spend money here? Because I've only got this amount of money. Where do I spend my money? Do I do it here? Do I do it there? Right? It's like all of that comes from having my own business. And that is something that you will never learn and can never learn by just reading books, reading stories, reading blogs, following someone on Instagram. It's just, following someone on TikTok. No, you have to be in it. You have to be faced with those stresses, those decisions, to really know and understand what entrepreneurship is like. And so now, sitting in that role that I do now, yeah, it's afforded me such an advantage, because I can think like them. I can think like what it's like to run your own business. And that essentially was what these artists are. They have their own small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and in your industry, how do you build and maintain strong relationships?
Yeah, I mean that's also kind of its own, its own unique skill set, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
I like to call them like there's gamers and there's the non-gamers, right? I mean, essentially like your ability to network and to really kind of sell yourself and sell the business without overselling it as well, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
very important, and yeah, it's I have relationships with insurance brokers, with agents, with managers. It's like, and it's also such a different mix because everyone contributes to the artist's career or to the entertainer's career in different ways. So
Mm-hmm.
navigating those relationships properly is also very important, right? An agent doesn't really care about what kind of life and disability policy I set up for the artist, but they do care about how much money they have to spend for their tour next year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
navigating those relationships it's also paramount, and understanding what people need, the information they need, and what is beneficial for them and what's not beneficial for them. Yeah, that's really just a game in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for this last part of the podcast where we talk about advice, what advice would you give to young Asian professionals who aspire to break into these higher level business roles and make meaningful contributions to their own industries?
You got to work harder than everyone else. You got to work
Mm-hmm.
harder than everyone else. Nothing's going to be handed to you if you put your head down. You work harder than the person next to you. And it's not even about that. I would say that if you put your head down and just do what you need to do, go above and beyond, ask the right questions. Don't just ask questions, ask the right questions, stay involved, because it's one thing to just keep your head down and just do work and not stay involved, right? So
Mm-hmm.
is success, you will become successful in the sense that you will move up. I mean, you ask anyone who is in a role in my position, they never got
Mm-hmm.
there by just taking shortcuts. They got there because they worked harder than everyone around them. They worked there because they stayed involved. They asked the right questions, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the number one best advice I can give you is find what you love. If what you love is cleaning toilets, or if to do what you love is caddying for a tour golfer, or doing what you love is finance, whatever it is, find
Mm-hmm.
what you love. And if it means that you go to 3, 4, 5 different places to figure out what it is that you love, that's okay. But once you find what you love, like I said, work harder than the person next to you. Ask the right questions. Stay involved. I promise you, do not think about money. If money is your only motivating factor, you will always be unhappy. Find what
Mm-hmm.
you love, work your butt off for it, stay involved, ask the right questions, and I guarantee you the money will be there. The
Mm-hmm.
accolades will be there. The success will be there. But don't ever let money or these or accolades or like the vision of being successful or like having the title be your motivating factor. Find what you love, work harder than the person next to you, and I guarantee you're going to wake up and be like, oh, wow, I'm like, the money will be there, the success will be there. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you use all these other factors and the goals to, like these visions of being somewhere to be your goals,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, do what you love.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Thanks.
Yep. Yep.
And then during like challenging times and like struggles, what strategies or habits help you stay motivated, focused, and resilient?
Mind, body, spirit. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
be, you've got to be in a good place physically. You've got to be in a good
Mm-hmm.
place mentally, and you've got to be in a good place spiritually. When all those three things are not clicking, you will not be your best version of yourself. So you've got to do things to put yourself. That's really, I struggle with this still to this day. You've got to do things to put yourself in the best position for those three. And
Mm-hmm.
if you are in a good place mentally, physically, and spiritually, I promise you, there's like nothing will phase you. You could
Yeah.
you could you could you could you could have death staring you in the face, and I promise you, you will. I mean, or the worst, the most stressful situation or scenario staring you in the face, and you will have no anxiety. You will have no fear. But it's about getting yourself. It's really easy to be in a good place mentally sometimes, but not physically and spiritually, right? It's always, usually you have one of the three or two of the three, but to have, put everything in yourself to put everything in in a position to have all those three takes a lot. There's things that you have to do, right? Meditating, therapy, putting like self-help, like working out, like there's like getting good rest. There's so many basic things you can do to put yourself in and really be at the height, be at the peak of all of those three things. Now you're going to struggle with those for the rest of your life, but if you do those basic things that put yourself in those three, like at the peak of those three positions, I guarantee nothing will faze you.
Mm-hmm. And mentorship is often a contributor to success. Did you have a mentor when you were starting off? And if so, what insights or advice did they give you that had a lasting impact?
I definitely I didn't really have any mentors in college as much as I had really mentors when I was running the business, right? When I had the business, I had some older people who already had successful businesses, and I took pieces from them, right? I took pieces from them, and they used to give me great advice, but it was like great advice for like if and when you get married, like great advice for like how to be successful in business. But it was that was probably like the things that I held on to the most, because also like in your early 20s, it's like that's what that's when your real life starts, right? Real life doesn't start in college. Real life really starts, I think, a couple years into your 20s when you're like really trying to figure yourself out, because I didn't really know who I was until probably like my mid 20s. I definitely had like an identity crisis all the way up until my mid 20s. But then now it's like, I look back at how I've gotten to where I am at. I would say it was like my early 20s, mid 20s, all the advice I got from people who had already been doing what I've been doing is it was the foundation for where I'm at now. After that, I think at that point, it's like your mentors are just people you look up to who are just like, that you want to be, like you want to aspire to, right? So yeah, I mean, I think surround yourself with the right people, the right mentors in your early and mid 20s is very, very important.
And finally, if you could go back to the beginning of your career, what's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self about navigating challenges or opportunities?
Take life more seriously at an early age. I think don't, everyone, when you're in your early 20s, you think, oh, I've got so much time to figure things out. And like, I heard like most people don't really find their careers till they're 30. Like take life seriously as soon as I mean, even, most kids do, but there's a lot of kids who don't. I mean, I look at my younger self and what I was doing in my early mid 20s. I'm like, dang, if I had taken it more seriously, then I feel like I'd be I would have had the success that I had now, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, not now, right? Like, that's I feel like I wasted like the first, the first 4 or 5 years of my, like, not to say with the business but like I just felt like even running the business, I could have taken things more seriously then, So that's the best advice I can give.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You gave a lot of great insights and a lot of great advice. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.